September 14th, 1984. East Passyunk Avenue, South Philadelphia. A candy store. The back room. He walked in cool and easy, the way a man walks into a room he's been to 100 times. He greeted his best friend. He turned his back. 1 second. That was all it took. A gun came out from under the cushions of a couch, and Salvatore Salvi Testa, 28 years old, the crowned prince of the Philadelphia mob, took 2 bullets to the back of his skull. His body was hog-tied, wrapped in a blanket, and dumped on the side of a dirt road in Gloucester Township, New Jersey. When police found him 6 hours later, he was unrecognizable as the man who had, just 5 months earlier, been featured on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. This was not a random killing. This was not a rival crew. The man who set him up was his closest friend in the world. The man who pushed for his death was his own future father-in-law. And the man who signed the death warrant had watched Salvi grieve at his own father's funeral just 3 years before and wept alongside him. Every person in that conspiracy had eaten at his table, laughed at his jokes, and called him family. That is what makes this story different from every other mob hit you have ever heard. This is the story of how the Philadelphia mob destroyed its own future, how paranoia, wounded pride, and a broken engagement turned the most dangerous city in American organized crime into a killing field, and how the murder of one 28-year-old man ended up bringing down an entire crime family from the inside. But here is the thing that nobody talks about. The wedding invitations had already gone out. 700 guests. The Bellevue Stratford Hotel. A reception that would have been the social event of South Philadelphia that year. The wedding was 2 weeks away when everything changed. And the man who helped plan the celebration was already helping plan the murder. To understand why Salvi Testa died, you have to understand who his father was. And to understand his father, you have to understand the world Philip Testa built. Philip, the Chicken Man Testa, born April 21st, 1924, was a South Philadelphia institution. He was a broad-shouldered, quiet-spoken man who kept a chicken coop behind his row house and ran a produce operation as his legitimate front. The FBI had been watching him since the 1960s. He was old school in the best sense of the word. Disciplined, methodical, loyal to a fault. He served under Angelo Bruno, the so-called docile Don who ran Philadelphia for decades on a principle of restraint. Bruno believed the mob made more money when it stayed out of the newspapers. Philip Testa believed the same thing. For a long time, it worked. Then, in March of 1980, Angelo Bruno was shot in the back of the head while sitting in his car outside a restaurant in South Philadelphia. The mob's long era of quiet was over. Philip Testa stepped into the vacuum and became boss. His son Salvi, 23 years old at the time, sharp and hungry and raised in the streets of South Philly, was watching and learning. Salvi Testa graduated from St. John Neumann High School in 1974. He spent a year at Temple University, then walked away from it. The streets were calling. His father's world was calling. And when Angelo Bruno died and his father became boss, the decision about what kind of life Salvi was going to lead became official. In June of 1980, Philip Testa personally inducted his own son into La Cosa Nostra. That ceremony was conducted with the full ritual: blood, oath, fire, the needle, the burning image of the saint. Salvi became a made man with his father holding the match. That detail matters, because less than 9 months later, the same oath that was supposed to protect Philip Testa would get him killed. On March 15th, 1981, Philip the Chicken Man Testa returned home to his row house in South Philadelphia, the one that sat across from Stephen Girard Park. It was late. He walked up the front steps. He reached for his door, and a nail bomb hidden beneath his front porch exploded with enough force to be heard 6 blocks away. Nails tore through his body. He survived the initial blast by minutes. He was dead before the ambulance reached the hospital. Philip Testa had been a boss for less than 1 year. Salvi was 24 years old. His mother had died the year before. Now his father was gone. He had no parents left, just the mob, just the street, and a burning need to find out who put that bomb under his father's porch. Here is where Salvi Testa becomes something more than a sad story. He is grief, turned into something precise and cold and effective. Within weeks, investigators and mob insiders had identified the conspirators behind the nail bomb. Philip's own underboss, Peter Casella, had ordered it, along with capo Frank Narducci Sr. They had used a carpenter named Willard Morin to build the device. In the mob's logic, this was the ultimate betrayal. The men closest to the boss had murdered the boss. Salvi did not fall apart. He aligned himself with Nicodemo Little Nicky Scarfo, the compact and explosive Atlantic City-based boss who took over the Philadelphia family after Philip's death. Scarfo promoted Salvatore Chucky Merlino to underboss and gave Salvi his father's loan sharking operations as inheritance. It was, in mob terms, a generous gesture. Scarfo even helped rebuild Salvi's house. But Scarfo had an agenda. He needed Salvi's loyalty, and for a few years, he got exactly that. In January of 1982, Frank Narducci Sr., the man who helped murder the Chicken Man, was shot dead on the street in South Philadelphia. Salvi was involved. Peter Casella was banished from the family and fled to Florida, never to return. One by one, the men who killed Philip Testa were dealt with. Salvi earned his stripes. He earned his captain's rank. He earned something that was increasingly rare in the Scarfo organization: respect. But then remember this name, because it will become critical in about 5 minutes. Joseph Joey Pung Punjatori, Sal's best friend. The man who would help kill Frank Narducci Sr. alongside Salvi in January of 1982 and get made himself as a reward. The man Salvi trusted more than anyone else on the street. Remember Joey Pung. On July 31st, 1982, Salvi Testa was walking near his home in Philadelphia's Italian Market section when a car slowed alongside him and opened fire. 8 shots, stomach, arm, leg. He went down in the street. He should have died. He did not. The shooters, Victor DeLuca and Joseph Padula, were acting on orders from the Harry Rickabine faction, a rival crew that was in open war with Scarfo. Both men were convicted on January 17, 1983, of aggravated assault and weapons charges. Salvi walked out of that hospital and back onto the street. That was who he was. The near-death experience did not shake him. It confirmed him. He ran his loan sharking operations through South Philadelphia and Atlantic City. He took his cut from construction rackets, from gambling books, from extortion. Accounts from federal investigators estimated his annual earnings in the low 7 figures by 1983. He sold his stake in an Atlantic City nightclub for an additional $1.1 million in profit. He was 27 years old and worth more than most legitimate businessmen twice his age. And then, in April of 1984, a journalist named James Bovard wrote an article about the Philadelphia mob's control of the construction industry. It ran on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And right there, in black and white, above the fold, was the name Salvatore Testa, described as the fastest rising star in the Scarfo organization. That newspaper nearly got him killed before anyone even had a real reason. You have to understand Nicky Scarfo to understand what that article meant. Nicodemo Scarfo, 5'5", wiry and volcanic, was a man who measured loyalty in fear. He had ordered the murders of nearly 30 people in his own organization since taking over as boss. Not rivals, not enemies, his own men. Scarfo did not just rule through violence, he was addicted to it. Former associates said he would light up when talking about killings the way other men talk about sports scores. So when the Wall Street Journal called Salvi Testa the fastest rising star in the organization, that was not a compliment in Scarfo's world. That was a threat. That was a headline screaming that someone else in the family was getting bigger than the boss. And Scarfo was paying attention. But here is where the story gets another layer entirely. Because in the summer of 1984, Sal Testa was planning a wedding. He was engaged to Maria Merlino. She was the daughter of Chucky Merlino, Scarfo's underboss. the man who had been one of Philip Testa's closest associates in the old days. The wedding was set for the Bellevue Stratford Hotel, an iconic Philadelphia landmark. 700 guests, a ceremony that would have united two of the most powerful families in the Philadelphia mob. For a moment, it looked like Salvi Testa was building something permanent. Then he called it off. The accounts vary on exactly why. What's documented is that Sal Testa broke off the engagement to Maria Merlino approximately 2 months before the wedding. The invitations, the venue, the deposits, the plans that Chucky Merlino had been bragging about to his crew for months, gone. Sal was out. Chucky Merlino did not take it quietly. In mob culture, this was not just a personal insult, it was a statement. Breaking off an engagement to the underboss's daughter was a declaration that you did not respect the underboss enough to go through with it. Merlino went to Scarfo. He wanted blood. And Scarfo, who had already been looking for a reason, said yes. Nicholas Caramondi, known as Nick the Crow, was a Scarfo soldier who later turned government witness. His testimony laid out exactly what Salvi already knew in his bones. Quote, Salvi was very cautious. He just felt bad vibes. Every time you shook his hand, he'd bring you in close with his right hand and just pat you down with his left hand from behind to see if you were carrying a gun. Salvi knew. He did not know for certain, but he knew enough to check every handshake for a wire or a weapon. Caramondi testified that if Testa had been completely sure of what was coming, he would not have waited. He would have struck first. Quote, this kid would have gone down in a blaze of glory. But he wasn't sure. That uncertainty cost him everything. Now we are back to Joey Pung. And this is the part that is almost impossible to process even 40 years later. Joseph Pungitori had been Salvi Testa's best friend for years. They grew up together in the streets of South Philadelphia. They got made together in the same era. They killed together. Joey Pung was supposed to be the best man at Sal's wedding. He knew Sal's habits, his routines, his tells, his patterns. He knew that Sal would never walk into a room arranged by a stranger, but he would walk into a room arranged by Joey Pung. That is what Nicky Scarfo understood, that the safest weapon against a careful man is the person that careful man trusts completely. Scarfo gave Joey Pungitori an order: lure Testa to a meeting. Pungitori, according to court testimony, was told the consequences of refusing were the same as the consequences Testa was facing. You come along, or you end up alongside him. Pungitori agreed. He had one condition: he would not pull the trigger himself. Scarfo brought in Salvatore Wayne Grande as the shooter. On September 14th, 1984, Joey Pungitori called Salvi. Routine meeting, just business, nothing unusual. The kind of call Salvi had taken from his best friend dozens of times. The location was the back room of the Too Sweet Candy Store on East Passyunk Avenue in South Philadelphia. A regular social club spot. Familiar, safe. That was the entire design. Sal walked in. Wayne Grande was sitting on the couch in the back room, hands in his lap. Sal greeted him. Then he turned toward Joey Pung to talk. The moment his back was to the couch, Grande reached under the cushion where the gun had been hidden, stood up, and fired once into the back of Sal Testa's head. He fired a second time as Testa fell. Joey Pungitori did not pull the trigger. He just stood there while his best friend died 5 feet in front of him. Nicholas Caramondi, Charlie Ianesi, and Joe Grande helped move the body. They bound Salvi's hands and feet with rope, wrapped him in a blanket, drove him across the state line into New Jersey, and left him on the side of a dirt road in Gloucester Township. He was 28 years old, 2 weeks from a wedding that was never going to happen. When police found the body, Salvi Testa was identified by his jewelry. His face was gone. On September 20th, 1984, approximately 300 people attended his funeral procession at St. Paul's Catholic Church in Philadelphia's Italian Market section. He was buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Eden, Pennsylvania, in the family plot, alongside his father Philip and his mother Althea. 3 generations of tragedy in one piece of ground. Now, here is what happened next, and why this murder mattered far beyond one man in a back room. Every mobster in America was watching, and what they saw was this. Scarfo had just killed his most loyal, most talented, most productive captain, a man who had avenged Philip Testa's murder. A man who had been shot 8 times and come back to work. A man the Wall Street Journal called the future of the organization. And Scarfo had killed him because a newspaper article made him jealous, and a broken engagement wounded his underboss's pride. The reaction across organized crime was immediate. Other crime families began to quietly distance themselves from Philadelphia. You could not do business with a man who killed his best people for political insecurity. The foundation of La Cosa Nostra was loyalty. Scarfo had just demonstrated that loyalty meant nothing in his world. Within 18 months, the Philadelphia family was fracturing from within. 2 key soldiers, Tommy Del Giorno and Nicholas Caramandi, made the decision to cooperate with federal investigators. They had seen what happened to Salvi Testa. They understood that no one was safe. On November 17, 1988, a federal jury convicted Nicodemo Scarfo on RICO charges. He was personally convicted of ordering murders, the first mob boss in American history to be found guilty of that specific charge in open court. In May of 1989, a federal judge in Philadelphia sentenced him to 55 years in federal prison. He would never walk free again. He died behind bars in January of 2017 at age 87. Chucky Merlino, the man whose wounded pride helped light the fuse, developed a severe drinking problem in the months after the Testa murder. Scarfo demoted him and cut ties with him. He was eventually convicted on separate charges and served time. The family he thought he was protecting was gone within 4 years of Sal Testa's death. Joey Pungitori was convicted on 10 RICO predicate acts, including conspiracy to murder Salvatore Testa. He went to federal prison. The best man at a wedding that never happened, sentenced for the murder of the groom. Salvatore Wayne Grande, the shooter, was convicted as well. Philip Leonetti, Scarfo's own nephew and the man who would have inherited the empire, eventually turned government witness. He told federal prosecutors everything. The Scarfo machine had eaten itself alive. Think about what this story actually is. It is not just a mob murder. It is a portrait of how paranoia and ego become the most lethal weapons in any organization. Salvi Testa did not die because he was disloyal. He died because he was too good at his job. He appeared in the right newspaper. He attracted too much respect. He loved the wrong woman and had the backbone to walk away from a bad arrangement. In a functional world, all 3 of those things would have made him a leader. In Nicky Scarfo's Philadelphia, they made him a target. The people who killed Salvi Testa got nothing from it. Scarfo got 55 years. Merlino got disgrace. Pungitori got a federal cell. The Philadelphia mob went from one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the Northeast to a collapsed, squabbling remnant within a decade. They destroyed their crown prince and handed the FBI the entire case in the process. Salvi Testa, born March 31, 1956, murdered September 14, 1984, 28 years old. Buried in the same ground as his father, in the same city where both of them were born, surrounded by the same men who always claimed to love them. The Mafia does not kill its enemies first. It kills its most dangerous friends. That is the truth this story leaves you with. Not glory, not power. A body on a road in New Jersey, and a wedding that nobody attended. If this story hit different, hit subscribe. We drop a new mob documentary every single week. And drop a comment below. We want to know, was Nicky Scarfo the most self-destructive mob boss in American history? Or was there someone worse? Let us know.